This is a thick book. I'm concerned about only having 2 weeks to read it. As long as I don't get too much work, I'm sure it'll be fine. And it's finals. How much work could I really get? So the next book added to my list of books read this school year is The House in the Cerulean Sea, I don't know, by T.J. Klune, which brings my total books read this school year up to 3, which is 3 more than I would have liked it to be because I don't read. I haven't read those yet, so I can still say that. So to avoid a 20-hour summary of the book like I did with Annie, because that video is way too long and required in the criteria last time, or this time, at least I don't think it was, and so that was a long time to waste on nothing. The simple premise of this book is that it follows a man named Linus Baker who works at this company where he's pretty aggressively monitored. Every single thing he does is like under constant scrutiny and surveillance, and if he does really anything wrong, it goes like on this record against him. And he's kind of fearing for his job because even into his 40s, he's not doing too well. But he gets called by the upper head of management where they give him a classified level 4 assignment where he's meant to go to this house or orphanage. There are orphanages that every kid in this book is like has some kind of like powers or abilities or something. Some of them are just kind of animals. It was kind of hard to tell. But he's sent to this orphanage that has like 6 of what are like meant to like children that are so bad. I don't think bad is what I'm looking for. So much that even one of them would be a lot. So having 6 of them is a lot, but they've only been getting vague callbacks from Arthur Parnassus, I believe his name is, which would be unusual for the amount of work he'd be taking on with the kids he has. So Linus goes there, and I mean, at first it kind of seems like he's just gonna die immediately. I mean, like, it's kind of crazy that he didn't just walk out immediately after seeing what he saw, but I guess I'm not him. And despite his job specifically telling him not to get attached to any of the children, and even though he claims he doesn't, and it's just empathetic, it does seem like with the time he spends with these kids and Arthur that he does become attached. At least that was my understanding. That was my understanding. It will be a phrase I use quite a bit because of reasons I'll get into with things I disliked about this book in a few moments, whatever. Anyways, he seems to run up to these kids. I believe I was somewhere around there, to my understanding. And I mean, it does seem like throughout the whole thing, he's still trying to do his job, but at the same time, it seems like he loosens up. Even towards the end, he does seem to be fighting between his, like, desires, I guess you would call them, and his responsibility of doing his job, where he says, or Arthur says, "Stay here with us, stay here with me," and Linus says, "You know I can't." Arthur says, "No, I don't know that." Linus turned and opened his eyes. Arthur was pale, his mouth in a thin line. Linus thought he could see the faint outline of burning wings behind him, but it might have just been a trick of the low light. "It was always temporary," Linus said. "I don't belong here." "If you can't belong here, then where can you belong?" "I have a life," Linus said. "I have a home. A home isn't always the house we live in, it's also the people we choose to surround ourselves with. You may not live on the island, but you can't tell me it's not your home. Your bubble, Mr. Baker, it's been popped. Why would you allow it to grow around you again?" "I have a job to do," he finished lamely. "People are counting on me. Not just here. There are other children who could need me, who could be in the same position you were in once. Shouldn't I do everything I can to help them?" When he eventually returns home to his home and work, he seems to kind of stop following the rules, as seen where he keeps a photograph on his desk and he's given 10 demerits for it. Eventually he does decide to go back, and he stays for good this time, I believe. I didn't read the second book. Maybe it has something to do with when he leaves again. He seems to come to see the kids at the orphanage and Arthur, 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 as the family he never had. At the end, you could see page 380, where he returns and he's talking to the kids as they talk more and more, and he's staying. His eyes start to sting up, and it seems like he's going to cry tears of joy. And he even says, "I've seen things here, learned things I didn't know before. It changed me. I didn't know how much until I no longer had it. When I could no longer wake up or walk to the house for breakfast, or listen to you teach them, or discuss your ludicrous thoughts on philosophy with you, or go on adventures on Saturdays wearing ridiculous outfits while being threatened with a grisly death. You corrupted me." And then he asks Arthur to ask him the same thing that he did initially when he had to leave, which was stay here with us, with me. And as Linus is answering, Arthur kisses him, and that leads into the epilogue where, the closing, it's a pretty short epilogue where it's just basically describing him in his new life, and it seems like they're getting married, or that was my interpretation of the end thing. The book does some things well. It's descriptive, which is a double-edged sword for me, but I'll get into that in the dislikes, because it is pretty good at painting a picture of who the characters are, what they look like, what the scenes are like. In the beginning, when he's describing the work and how he can barely fit through the desks, and how it uses the physical descriptions of the upper management people, instead of giving us, the readers, the names of upper management, we get their names are replaced by descriptions of them as Linus sees them. This book has a pretty decent ending. I mean, it seems fairly obvious that, he will end up staying, because typically, if they wanted to give, a good ending, or I guess it would be more fitting to say a happy ending for the characters, it would make sense for him to go back and stay. Lots of people prefer happy endings over sad endings. Doesn't really push me one way or the other, but the ending is done nice. I also like that the book ended, because I don't want to read any more of it. I liked Linus, kind of, but I think I was slightly biased, because since the beginning of the book I imagined him with an aggressively British accent, because of the way he...
Oh dear, this is most unusual, innit? How often do you make things float, mate? I appreciate it, madame. I do right agree. Cheerio. Charmed!
Yeah, that. And he's a pretty well-written character, in my opinion. I mean, it's nice to see him go through the gradual change. This is, again, going to be a double-edged sword that I will talk about in the dislikes as well, but it's nice to see him go from, at the beginning, he's strictly business, but you can see the seeds of something more when they talk about getting attached to the children. He says, "Oh, no, I'm not attached, I'm just empathetic to them," and he clearly could be getting attached to them. He clearly has that capability, and while that's kind of good foreshadowing, that not only gives insight to his character, it kind of shows that when you can kind of guess that when he goes to his new assignment, that he'll probably end up getting attached. But I also don't believe it was also kind of a really simple, from the beginning of the book, you could guess what the ending of the book is going to be, which it's not great. It's not, lots of books have that. Just depends on, the book and the reader. Some readers might be able to go, "Oh, well, this is going to happen," some might not. I personally found it to be a bit predictable, but I like that it referenced Nat King Cole. He makes good music, or he did. I'm sure he's dead by now. So things I don't like about this book, it was so so confusing. And to be fair, I was half asleep 90% of the time I was reading this book because I wasn't the most interested in it. And I am aware that you said if I didn't like this book, keep it to myself or something to not just to spare your feelings. But I can't. This book was kind of confusing, and sometimes I would read something and go, oh, so this is happening. And then it'd be like, but that's not happening. Or maybe it was. I still don't know because there are parts of this book now this could also just be an issue of I'm not a very good reader, like I said last time. That's why I liked Annie. It was so simple and I could understand it. But, I read something in this book and I go, oh, so what you're saying is, and then TJ Klune comes in and goes, no, that is not what I'm saying. I'm actually saying this. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that means. And they're like, yep. So this book was very confusing. The pacing, I did not like. This is that double-edged sword with the description being so vivid, and the watching him, go through that change where he learns to, where he starts getting attached. The book was very, very slow, in my opinion, because I'm a very slow reader, so I need books to be faster, because then when I'm a slow and bad reader, it evens itself out. If a book is already slow, and then I'm also a slow and bad reader, then the book becomes like a slog, and that's not very interesting to read. That's why I was asleep half the time, half asleep half the time. I felt like the book was too long for its own good. It's like 396 pages of actual content, and the font is small. With Annie, for example, it was 300 pages and the font was kind of big, so they didn't spend too much time, which I did say there. Sometimes the pacing was a bit fast in that book, so maybe I just can't be pleased. But I do believe that the pacing in this book was just too slow for me personally. For other people, it's fine. I mean, you read it, it was on your board of things you read that I always stare at. But, so, I'm sure, and you didn't want me to say I didn't like it, so I'm sure you enjoyed it. But, it was too slow for me. This book makes attempts at humor, and it's fine. I mean, I don't know. I don't find much. It's not easy to get me to laugh at things, especially if I'm reading it. I don't know. It attempts sarcasm, and the tone I didn't even realize it was sarcasm, because obviously that's not the book's fault. It's just you can't really convey tone over a book. I mean, you can, because tone and mood, but I'm not hearing a speaking tone, so I'm not going as I'm reading this, oh, this is sarcasm. I'm going, oh, she's saying this, and then it happens to be sarcasm, and it goes right over my head. I also just might be dumb, because I don't know, maybe it was obvious that it was sarcasm. My favorite passage from this book is, Linus is wiping tears away from amusement. He told himself when the music changed yet again. He recognized it even before Nat King Cole began to sing. He looked up to see Arthur Parnassus standing before him, hand outstretched. Thank you. You keep saying I'm not singing. And Linus Baker allowed himself to be selfish just this once. He took Arthur's hand and slowly stood as Nat told him to smile, even though his heart was breaking. Arthur pulled him close, and they began to sway back and forth. So, I mean, it's a nice scene to establish the relationship that's growing between Arthur and Linus. I more like it because it references Nat King Cole, and he makes good music, like I mentioned earlier. But, from an analytical standpoint, this scene is good for setting up the relationship between Linus and Arthur, which we could see fully developed by the end of the 19th chapter and the epilogue. There was something else I liked, which I should have written down in my notes, that are just page numbers with a few words, but I didn't, and now I have to find it again. I couldn't find it, so I'll move on to the next part I meant to talk about. which pages 220 to 225, I think, maybe a bit after that. It's the scene where scene where Arthur gives Linus a gift, which Lucy is a part of. And at first Linus is confused. He doesn't understand why someone would be giving him a gift. It mentions in detail how he's not used to getting gifts. His mother gave him gifts before she passed, but even then they were small things, and he cherished them, but he hadn't gotten one in so long that he was confused because he didn't ask for anything. Why was he getting anything? And then when he heard that Lucy was in on it, he was like, he wanted it even less. He was like, oh, well, whatever's in here is going to kill me, because he didn't really trust any of them yet, really. When he opened it and saw that it was a record player, he instantly swapped, and he was talking about how wonderful it was and how he hadn't seen one in so long, and he was really just like ecstatic with his gift. I think this is important. This is about like exactly halfway into the book. It helps to kind of show the line between his professionalism and his mistrust and his desires and attachment, where he acts professional, is like, oh, I didn't ask for anything, why'd you get me anything? And then he's like, oh, but it's some kind of trick, it's some kind of trap, because these kids, they don't trust me, I don't trust them. And then he opens it, and then he like swaps to the other side, where his professionalism drops, and for a moment we can see where he lets out this side of him that is less professional and is more open to attachment and to excitement and to really kind of feeling. I mean, it's not that he didn't feel before, but he was more professional the way he felt than he was in like this burst we see in this scene. I wouldn't recommend this book to many people. It was boring. It wasn't terrible. I'm sure some people would find enjoyment. I'm sure you found enjoyment if you recommended it, or you just really hate me and wanted to recommend the book that you didn't like. But yeah, I'm sure there's an audience out there that would enjoy this book. But I'm not it. It seems like a book my sister would enjoy, because she's more into like the fantasy stuff, I guess. Harry Potter nerd, maybe that type of people. So for what this book taught me, I personally did not get much lesson out of this book. I could very clearly see what it was trying to convey, but it didn't affect me personally. But this book heavily focuses on like acceptance and found family, which found family was also a theme in Annie, which if I had to choose a book to read to learn about found family, I know which one I'd choose. But this very much has those themes with how at the beginning of the book, how he talks about how he's like in his 40s. I bookmarked this page actually. He'd recently turned 40, and all he had to show for it was a tiny house, a crusty cat that would probably outlive everyone, and an ever-expanding waistline his doctor had poked and prodded with a strange amount of glee, while bloviating about the wonders of dieting. And so, he's clearly not very happy with his situation. He talks about being lonely as well. I don't have that bookmarked, but I know it was around here, so I'm sure I could find it. I lied, I cannot find it, but it does talk about being lonely at the very beginning somewhere. I didn't bookmark it though. I've been looking for like 5 minutes and I still can't find it, but I know it's in here somewhere. There's something in here about him saying that if he asked if he was lonely, he would deny it, but it's like shown that he really is lonely, and I wish I could find it, and it's really bothering me that I can't. It's really bothering me that I can't, but I don't know what to tell you. If I can't find it, I can't read it. I found it. If one were to ask Linus Baker, what? Oh, if one were to ask if Linus Baker was lonely, he would have scrunched up his face in surprise. The thought would be foreign, almost shocking, and though the smallest of lies hurt his head and made his stomach twist, there was a chance he would still say no, even though he was, and almost desperately so. He is lonely. I'm not crazy. I knew that was in there. What was earlier? Found family. That's what this whole thing was about. I searched for that for a really long time. I don't remember what I was just talking about. Yeah, so the book talks about found family and why. Also acceptance. Unless I misunderstood, there appears to be like a lot of acceptance for. There appears to be a lot of acceptance. Oh my god, I can't say that word. Accept the opposite of denial. Within this book, because specifically between Arthur and Linus, who are portrayed as two gay men, who at the end of the book, I think get married. That's my interpretation of the exchange that happens in the last page, 2 pages. But the question is, what did I learn from this book? Or what did this book teach me? Nothing. I don't take life advice from books about a magical island, a dangerous task, and a burning secret. If I had to ask the author one thing, why is there another book in this series? Why? This book is this big, long, whatever, and you're telling me that you didn't put everything you wanted to in one book? How? I don't know what the second one's called. Maybe it's under the Whispering Door, but I don't know. I don't see why it would be on the back advertised if it wasn't the second one. But what possibly more could there be to say? Apparently, the Whispering Tree has Applebee's in it, because I just opened through a page and they're just talking about Applebee's. Anyways, you could buy a bag of lemonade from Applebee's. I just had to point that out. Anyways, yeah, why was there a need for a second book when the first one wasn't that good, and it's so long that you could have said everything you needed to say if you had just spent more time being a bit more concise and were a little better on pacing. And that would be everything. I should probably stop talking now. This recording is an hour and 20 minutes long, and I'm gonna have to edit that down to as short as I can get it. I'll probably have to cut a lot out, but we'll see.